Miss Shames here. I'm going to be doing read aloud with you all. And we're going to be continuing and finishing chapter 1 of the Hunger Games. So I just want to go over some of our jots from last time. And remember that that's a good strategy that readers can use when they want to kind of jog their memory of what's happening. They can go over their jots and remind themselves of what they were thinking. So last read aloud, we learned that Katniss and Gale have a really strong friendship. Katniss really values her friendship with Gale. She mentions that she wouldn't want anything romantic to happen between them because she wouldn't want to ruin their friendship. And she was a little jealous when other girls liked him, but really because she didn't want to lose him as a hunting partner. We noticed that the problem was deepening quite a bit. We were learning more and more how hunger affects the people in District 12. So Katniss explains how both her and Gale's mothers depend on their children for food, and they're generally very hungry. We also learned that people in this district accept dog meat as regular food, and probably that's out of desperation. They're so desperate for food. We also learned that something dreadful happens each year when names are called and a few families are in distress because their children have been chosen while everyone else is relieved. And this is called the reaping. And we've noticed that the author is kind of like revealing the details of what the reaping really is kind of slowly. And I mentioned that I thought the author was doing this on purpose to kind of build some suspense, to build some mystery. So it's like an author's craft move. We also learned more about the setting and how the setting affects the characters. So we learned that they're in what's called the country of Panem, and there's lots of poverty there. People tend to be very poor. We learned that people in power are putting the citizens at risk. We also learned that people are so hungry and desperately poor that they're increasing their risk for a little extra food. So we learned about the tessera, where people are basically choosing to have more of their name put into this draw in exchange for more food. But we learned that there's also inequality in this country, that not everyone is starving, and some people have more food. We're learning about concepts of power. So we learned that there's people who are in the capital. They're the ones who kind of established these rules, and they're very much in control of people's lives. We also learned that there's the rest of the people in the districts, but then there's also inequality between them, and that creates unequal power. So there's the people who are really starving, and these are the miners, the workers, like Katniss's family and Glenn's family. But then there's people in the districts who aren't at the level of being at the capital, but they have more money and more food than the other people, and that gives them a little more power. So today we're going to be reading the rest of chapter 1.
What do you want to do? I ask. We can hunt, fish, or gather? Me, although I never say so. It's not that I don't agree with him. I do. But what good is yelling about the capital in the middle of the woods? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make things fair. It doesn't fill our stomachs. In fact, it scares off the nearby game. I let him yell, though. Better he does it in the woods than in the district. Gale and I divide our spoils, leaving 2 fish, a couple of loaves of bread, greens, a quart of strawberries, salt, paraffin, and a bit of money for each. See you in the square, I say. Wear something pretty, he says flatly. At home, I find my mother and sister are ready to go. My mother wears a fine dress from her apothecary days. Prim is in my first reaping outfit, a skirt and ruffled blouse. It's a bit big on her, but my mother has made it stay with pins. Even so, she's having trouble keeping the blouse tucked in the back. A tub of warm water waits for me. I scrub off the dirt and sweat from the woods, and even wash my hair. To my surprise, my mother has laid out one of her own lovely dresses for me, a soft blue thing that matches with matching shoes. Are you sure? I ask. I'm trying to get past rejecting offers of help from her. For a while, I was so angry, I wouldn't allow her to do anything for me. And this is something special. Her clothes from her past are very precious to me. Of course, let's put your hair up too, she says. I let her towel dry it and braid it up on my head. I can hardly recognize myself in the cracked mirror that leans against the wall. You look beautiful, says Prim in a hushed voice. Nothing like myself, I say. I hug her because I know these next few hours will be terrible for her. Her first reaping, she's about as safe as you can get since she's only entered once. I wouldn't let her take out any tesserae, but she's worried about me, that the unthinkable might happen. I protect Prim in every way I can, but I'm powerless against the reaping. The anguish I always feel when she's in pain wells up in my chest and threatens to register on my face. I notice her blouse is pulled up out of her skirt in the back again and force myself to stay calm. Tuck your tail in, little duck, I say, smoothing the blouse back in place. Prim giggles and gives me a small quack. Whack yourself, I say with a light laugh, the kind only Prim can draw out of me. Come on, let's eat, I say, and plant a quick kiss on the top of her head. Fish and greens are already cooking in a stew, but that will be for supper. We decide to save the strawberries and bakery bread for this evening's meal and make it special, we say. Instead, we drink milk from Prim's goat, Lady, and eat the rough bread made from the tessera grain, although no one has much of an appetite anyway. At 1 o'clock, we head for the square. Attendance is mandatory unless you're on death's door. This evening, officials will come around and check to see if this is the case. And if not, you'll be imprisoned.
So we're learning more about power and power inequalities in this story. So Katniss said that she felt powerless against the reaping. And also in her narration, which means like in her telling of the story, she explains how the people in control imprison anyone who does not attend the reaping. So we're just deepening in our understanding of like, there are a lot of characters who really lack control, really lack power, and then characters who are kind of, and we don't even know these characters yet, but we know that there's people in this country who are controlling everything and in kind of a brutal way.
It's too bad, really, that they hold the reaping in the square, one of the few places in District 12 that can be pleasant. The square is surrounded by shops, and on public market days, especially if there's good weather, it has a holiday feel to it. But today, despite the bright banners hanging on the buildings, there's an air of grimness. The camera crews, perched like buzzards on rooftops, only add to the effect. People file in and sign in. The reaping is a good opportunity for the Capitol to keep tabs on the population as well. 12 through 18-year-olds are herded into the roped areas marked off by ages, the oldest in the front, young ones, like Prim, toward the back. Family members line up around the perimeter, holding tightly to one another's hands. But there are others, too, who have no one they love at stake, or who no longer care, who slip among the crowd, taking bets on the 2 kids whose names will be drawn. Odds are given on their ages, whether they're seam or merchant, or if they will break down and weep. Most refuse dealing with the racketeers, but carefully. These same people tend to be informers, and who hasn't broken the law? I can be shot on a daily basis for hunting, but the appetites of those in charge protect me. Not everyone can claim the same. Anyway, Gail and I agree that if we have to choose between dying of hunger and a bullet in the head, the bullet would be much quicker. The space gets tighter, more claustrophobic as people arrive. The square is quite large, but not enough to hold District 12's population of about 8,000. Latecomers are directed to the adjacent streets, where they can watch the event on screens as it's televised live by the state. I find myself standing in a clump of 16s from the seam. We all exchange terse nods, then focus our attention on the temporary stage that's set up before the Justice Building. It holds 3 chairs, a podium, and 2 large glass balls, one for the boys and one for the girls. I stare at the paper slips in the girls' ball. 20 of them have Katniss Everdeen written on them in careful handwriting. Two of the three chairs fill with Madge's father, Mayor Undersea, who's a tall, balding man, and Effie Trinket, District 12's escort, fresh from the Capitol with her scary white grin, pinkish hair, and spring green suit. They murmur to each other and then look with concern at the empty seat. Just as the town clock strikes 2, the mayor steps up to the podium and begins to read. It's the same story every year. He tells of the history of Pan Am, the country that rose up out of the ashes of a place that was once called North America. He lists the disasters, the droughts, the storms, the fires, the encroaching seas that swallowed up so much of the land, the brutal war for what little sustenance remained. The result was Pan Am, a shining capital ringed by 13 districts, which brought peace and prosperity to its citizens. Then came the dark days, the uprising of the districts against the capital. 12 were defeated, the 13th obliterated. The Treaty of Treason gave us the new laws to guarantee peace, and as our yearly reminder that the dark days must never be repeated, it gave us the Hunger Games. The rules of the Hunger Games are simple. In punishment for the uprising, each of the 12 districts must provide one girl and one boy, called tributes, to participate. The 24 tributes will be imprisoned in a vast outdoor arena that could hold anything from a burning desert to a frozen wasteland. Over a period of several weeks, the competitors must fight to the death. The last tribute standing wins. Taking the kids from our districts, forcing them to kill one another while we watch, this is the Capitol's way of reminding us how totally we are at their mercy, how little chance we would stand of surviving another rebellion. Whatever words they use, the real message is clear. Look how we take your children and sacrifice them, and there's nothing you can do. If you lift a finger, we will destroy every last one of you, just as we did in District 13.
So in this section, in this last part that we read, the author, through Katniss's narration, really took the time to provide a lot of background information about the country of Pan Am and the Hunger Games. So this is a tool that authors of fantasy sometimes use, and it's when they take a little time out of the story, almost like a flashback, to explain a little bit about like the history of the fantasy world we're reading and to set up events that are happening currently in the story. So a lot of times in fantasy, we're in this whole other world that has all these complications to it, all these nuances and histories of that world. So sometimes authors of fantasy, and you can do this in your own fantasy writing, use some time in their writing to explain what's happening in that world, to give some background information.
To make it humiliating as well as torturous, the Capitol requires us to treat the Hunger Games as a festivity, a sporting event pitting every district against the others. The last tribute alive receives a life of ease back home, and their district will be showered with prizes, largely consisting of food. All year, the Capitol will show the winning districts gifts of the grain and oil and even delicacies like sugar, while the rest of us battle starvation. It is both a time for repentance and a time for thanks, intones the mayor. Then he reads the list of past District 12 victors. In 74 years, we have had exactly 2. Only one is still alive. Haymitch Abernathy, a paunchy, middle-aged man who at this moment appears hollering something unintelligible, staggers onto the stage and falls into the third chair. He's drunk. Very. The crowd responds with its token applause, but he's confused and tries to give Effie Trinket a big hug, which she barely manages to fend off. The mayor looks distressed. Since all of this is being televised, right now District 12 is a laughingstock of Pan Am, and he knows it. He quickly tries to pull the attention back to the reaping by introducing Effie Trinket. Bright and bubbly as ever, Effie Trinket trots to the podium and gives her signature "Happy Hunger Games!" and may the odds be ever in your favor. Her pink hair must be a wig because the curls have shifted slightly off-center since her encounter with Haymitch. She goes on a bit about what an honor it is to be here, although everyone knows she's just aching to get bumped up to a better district where they have proper victors, not drunks who molest you in front of the entire nation. Through the crowd, I spot Gale looking back at me with a ghost of a smile. As reapings go, this one is at least has a slight entertainment factor. But suddenly, I'm thinking of Gale and his 42 names in that big glass ball, and how the odds are not in his favor, not compared to a lot of the boys. And maybe he's thinking the same thing about me, because his face darkens and he turns away. But there are still thousands of slips. I wish I could whisper to him. It's time for the drawing. Effie Trinket says, as she always does, "Ladies first," and crosses to the glass ball with the girls' names. She reaches in, digs her hand deep into the ball, and pulls out a slip of paper. The crowd draws in a collective breath, and then you can hear a pin drop. I'm feeling nauseous, and so desperately hoping that it's not me, that it's not me, that it's not me. Effie Trinket crosses back to the podium, smooths the slip of paper, and reads out the name in a clear voice. And it's not me. It's Primrose Everdeen.
All right. Well, we finished chapter 1. So your short response for today is, how does the history of Panem connect to current events in the story? And be sure to use 2 details from the text to support your response. And we'll be moving on to chapter 2 in our next read aloud. Can't wait, and happy Monday, 5th graders.